Welcome everyone to another lesson of our iDebate Club. Today we'll be listening through countering opponents. Joining here with me are again Liu and Tom.
So, now we have a review of what we learned in the past lesson. So in lesson 2, we learned about how to use the CSI, claim support impact method, to build strong arguments. We also talked about what is a good argument and how to avoid logical fallacies like the straw man or personal attack. We also talked about how to strengthen speeches with logos, logic, pathos, passion, and ethos, ethics, to make your argument more appealing to the judge. In the second lesson, we finally talked about how to organize your ideas clearly and use strong and direct language to make your speech more impactful. And now, a preview of what we will learn in this lesson. We will answer these 4 questions. First of all, what a rebuttal is. We'll talk about the basics of rebuttals and why we should do it. How to construct rebuttals with the 4-step rebuttal method. We have our own sequence that you can follow to construct your own rebuttals with. How to rebuttal argument clearly and logically. Like constructing arguments, rebuttals also need to be clear and logical for the judge and the audience to follow. Finally, how to identify weak points in an argument for rebuttals. You need to be able to listen to them, identify what weak points they have to firmly rebuttal them.
Okay, so now we're talking about what is a rebuttal. Now, I think we went over this on lecture 1, but this is a more in-depth explanation. So, a rebuttal is a response to any opposing argument. So, they challenge the validity, accuracy, or impact of their arguments. So, the rebuttals can severely weaken the opponent's case, because this is where you get to respond to your opponent's arguments. So this is why a rebuttal is very important. So rebuttals, as I said before, they are very important. Without them, you have no way of challenging the opposing side's arguments. And if you don't respond to an argument, the other team can claim that you agree with their side, and this is very bad. So without rebuttals, you will severely reduce your chances of winning any debate. So these are the basic types of rebuttals. So logical rebuttals points out flaws or fallacies in your opponent's reasoning. So for example, you can say, this argument has the straw man fallacy or something like that. Evidence-based rebuttals use facts, data, or examples to disprove their claim or their argument. For example, you can say, our opponent said about this, but data from blah, blah, blah proves that this is not actually true, so your point does not stand. Turn rebuttals flips their argument to show that it actually supports your side. Like, you're flipping your argument to say, actually, this shows something, and this supports our side. Framework rebuttal, though this is not recommended, this challenges the way the debate is evaluated or judged. Like, maybe you're rebutting the definition of the motion.
So now we move on to the 4-step rebuttal method. These are the 4 basic steps of the rebuttal method. We have the signposting, the response, the explanation, and the impact. First thing first will be the signposting. This is labeling the point you are responding to. It keeps your speech organized and helps the judge to follow your speech and not try to trail off. This is very important because it shows control, it improves how clear your speech is, and it also makes sure that your rebuttal is not mistaken for a new point. These are the phrases that tell the difference. For example, turning to their first point on their claim about or our opponent said. A full example would be they claim raising the minimum wage hurts small businesses. See that the phrase they claim is a signposting. So this means that the judge could tell that you are making a rebuttal, not making another new point. And this is very important in a debate, as if you do not use signposting, your so-called rebuttal might be mistaken for a new point, and the whole purpose of a rebuttal might change. Now we have the response. This is when the direct engagement with your opponent's arguments. You can rebuttal their point in different ways. For example, you can disprove the logic, point out that this is wrong because they have a logical fallacy. You can say that the evidence is untrue or it is unusable. Discredit the evidence like this is untrue, as my studies states that something, something, something. Or you can also give a counterexample. Responding to the point is the key part of the rebuttal you are making. By stating why does the argument of the opponent does not stand in your world. For example, they assume that something, 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 but this is wrong and does not make sense because something. However, the argument does not stand because something, or our opponent is wrong because something. A full example in the motion would be this. This assumes businesses can adapt. Now, after response, we have the explanation. This is where you elaborate on why does the opponent's point is flawed and explain why your rebuttal makes sense. In this point, not only you need to point out the logical fallacies in the opponent point, you also need to use examples, sufficient logic and examples or analogies in your own rebuttal. The explanation part is important because without it, the opponent could say that your rebuttal is untrue or it isn't backed up by logic or evidence. For example, you could say that this is true because, think of it this way, or studies have shown that something, something, something. Now we have the impact. This is the most important part of the rebuttal. The impact shows why your rebuttal changes the outcome of the debate. For example, I will use deforestation example. If deforestation happens, then the animals will lose their shelter. That shifts the balance of this round in our favor. Because they failed to prove that deforestation harms infrastructure in the city, then our case is stronger because something, something, something. Or you could say, therefore, the argument isn't valid, causing causing more deforestation rates to happen. So we should win this debate. Now we'll move on to the transitional phrases. I'm not going to explain all of these, just you can take a picture and or screenshot and can send it to the group.
Okay, now let's have an example of the four-step rebuttal method. So the opponent point is like raising the minimum wage will hurt small businesses by increasing labor costs and forcing them to fire workers. By the way, you can take a screenshot of this when I'm explaining. So first of all, signposting, they argue that raising the minimum wage harms small businesses by increasing the labor costs. That's basically the opponent's argument. It's what you're responding to. Response is the basic explanation. However, this assumes that all businesses are unable to adapt to wage increases or benefit from them. This is the main reason you're rebuttaling them. For explanation, you're kind of like expanding on the response. You're building on your reason. You're explaining it. So studies show that higher wages reduce employee turnovers and boost productivity. Moreover, when workers earn more, they spend more, stimulating local economies. So you can use like statistics, reasoning, etc. in your explanation to back up your response to make your rebuttals more impactful. And finally, for the impact, if raising the minimum wage strengthens small businesses through higher demand and efficiency, then our side holds both moral and economic high ground for this debate. So the impact, you explain that how minimum wage helps small businesses, so they should our side should win the debate because it makes the economy grow and is more ethical for the small businesses. So how about let's do a bit of practice. So the motion for the argument is people should wake up early. And the opponent's argument is to argue that early risers are more productive and successful. So try to use the four-step method yourself, signposting, response, explanation, and impact, and try to give a short rebuttal to this argument. You can use your screenshots if you want. Okay, you have around like 5 minutes before we start calling someone.
So I think 5 minutes is up.
We have someone present. If you want to present, you can raise your hand, or we might start calling people to come up.
Can I choose whether I argue for or against?
This is like to practice for rebuttal, so you are arguing against the argument that early risers should are more productive and successful. So you're
So
arguing.
I think there's some confusion here. Like, this is like you're trying to come up with a rebuttal to the argument that early risers are more productive and successful. So why isn't that true? Like, why do you disagree with that argument?
Okay, I understand. Can I try?
Yes, you can. You're always welcome.
Okay. I think that if people yesterday worked hard really late and they sleep really late, when they wake up early, they actually slept really, like, they only slept for a few hours. So they might actually not be as successful and productive if they wake up later because they can sleep longer hours, not just wake up really early and be really tired.
Okay, thank you. That was wonderful. May we have someone else also come up? We have Julie. Can you present your rebuttal?
If we get up early, we will have more time to work and be able to finish with tasks earlier.
Okay, thank you. But I feel like we have a confusion here. This is about arguing against our presented argument, not arguing for or trying to practice our rebuttals right now. So may we finally have Leon to present your rebuttal against the argument. Okay, then I think we should move on right now. So here's the example of our rebuttal. So signposting, it's basically repeating their argument. They argue that early risers are more productive and successful. Response is basically, why do you think this is not true? So our response is, they claim generalizes success and ignores individual differences in work style and work patterns and lifestyle. So this basically says, why is your argument wrong? Because blah, blah, blah. Finally, then we have explanation, which is explaining the response, elaborating on it to give examples, to give reasoning of why the response makes sense. Many successful people are night owls. Productivity depends on time management, focus, and discipline rather than time of day someone wakes up. Studies show that when people work during the peak energy levels, regardless of whether it's morning or evening, they perform better. So basically saying that people should work on their peak energy hours instead of waking up early, which builds on the response. And finally, impacts. This weakens the claim by showing that success is not determined by wake up time. Promoting flexible routines is more inclusive and realistic than forcing early rising as a standard. So this finally talks about how we should win this rebuttal because if we showed that the argument doesn't make sense. You can spend a minute to take a screenshot if you want of this example.
Okay, so let's move on to pre-rebuttals. Now, what is a pre-rebuttal? A pre-rebuttal is a type of rebuttal where you present it before the opponent even presents their own argument. Now, this is very useful because this allows you to take full control of the motion. You can anticipate their common points and weaken their impacts before they even state it. So, for example, you can say, oh, the opponent might say that blah blah blah, but actually that's not true. So you can't have that point. So now the opponent has two choices: to not present that point that they already have, or to go with it. Now, if they go with it, you can say, we already stated how this point is not true, so therefore their argument does not stand, and this will cause the opponent to just like lose 1 point. So this will increase your chances of winning the debate. However, if the opponent chooses not to include that point, then they need to think fast. They need to think of an argument to include in their case within the next like 30 seconds or so. So this is a very useful skill. For example, the motion says that if the motion says that we should ban fast food advertising to children, and you're in the affirmative side, you can include a pre-rebuttal that says, some might say that it's up to parents to control what their kids eat. However, advertising is designed to bypass parental control by influencing the children's mind and preferences, which undermines that responsibility. So before they even state that point, you already rebutted it. So this is very useful. Now we're going to talk about strategic turns. Now, these are strategic turns are basically like small turns that you can include in your rebuttal to make it stronger. So there are 3 types of turns. There's link turn, there's impact turn, and there's double turn. Now we'll look at link turn first. So a link turn basically accepts your opponent's stated cause and effect relationship, but you argue that the outcome actually supports your side. So you start by looking at the cause and effect relationship and twisting the effect so that you're saying that, oh, the effect actually supports our case. So, for example, they say that social media increases awareness of global issues. In this case, the cause is social media, the effect is increased awareness of global issues. Now you're twisting the effect, which is awareness of global issues, into saying that, oh, because there's awareness of global issues, that's why regulating fake news on these platforms is so important. So this actually supports our side. Next, we'll go over impact turn. An impact turn accepts the final effect or consequence your opponent claims, but argues that it's actually bad for their case or good for yours. Now, to create an impact turn, you need to take the cause and effect and twist the cause so that it actually supports your side. So, for example, even if universal surveillance improves safety, now the cause is universal surveillance, the effect is improved safety. Now you're twisting the cause by saying that, oh, universal surveillance also causes fear and destroys freedom, and it creates a culture of control. So that is an impact turn. Now we'll talk about a double turn. Now, this is extremely risky because a double turn is essentially the combination of the link turn and the impact turn. So you're agreeing to both. in a point and twisting both so that it actually says, so you say, oh, both the cause and effect supports our side. Now, why is this very risky? It's because the opponent can then say, you accepted both the cause and effect, and therefore you agree with our point. So unless you've got a very good reason for it, we do not recommend using double turn because it is a very advanced subject. Now, for example, banning cars will slow down the economy. Now you're gonna twist both the cause and effect, so you're twisting both banning cars and slowing down the economy in favor of your side. So what you say is that's actually good because slower economic activity reduces overconsumption and pollution, helping us transition to a more sustainable model. So that's a double turn.
So now we have the common mistakes people might actually do when they're doing the rebuttals. I'm not going to say every one of them, but I am going to say the 3 most important mistakes I think is very important that you guys try to avoid. First of all, not directly addressing the specific point or lacking clear logic. This is very important and it is crucial for you to avoid this mistake. The meaning of this is that when doing a rebuttal, you are not directly responding to a point. For example, if the opponent says that school uniforms are good because they can improve the grades, your rebuttals are, if your rebuttal is this, no, I think that school uniforms are bad because of something. In this case, you are not directly addressing the point, and the judge or the opponent might use this as an advantage over you. And later in the summary speech, they might say, you did not clearly respond to our point, so this means that we should win this debate. Instead, you should do this. Your point on school uniforms can improve students' grades are wrong, or partly wrong, or in our case, it is wrong, right? This is directly addressing the point. And in this case, the opponent can only do but to respond to your one, and you can have a very pretty good advantage over the others. And also lacking clear logic. This is very clear, right? If you don't have good logic, then basically rebuttal is nothing. You can't say that school uniforms are bad because school uniforms can improve your grades, right? It's not possible. It's a paradox. You can't say that school uniforms are bad while saying school uniforms are doing something good. So for this point, not directly addressing this specific argument or lacking logic is very crucial, and maybe you should avoid it. The second most important mistake I think that you should avoid is that saying that's wrong without justification or reasoning. Saying that's wrong without justification or reasoning is kind of like a useless rebuttal, right? It's like when doing an English essay and then you're saying, this is good, and then it's done, right? It doesn't make any sense. In a debate, your rebuttal should be a direct address to the point. That is wrong. And with good logic. Why is it wrong? And you should have backup evidence saying, not only because of this, our evidence also shows this. Saying that's wrong without justification or reasoning doesn't really help the team or doesn't really help yourself much. Instead, it also gives the enemy team an advantage over your team by saying that they did not give enough evidence, and here we have enough evidence that shows that their stating is wrong, right? So saying that's wrong without justification or reasoning can be very, very crucial mistake. Last but not least, we have the offering only one weak point instead of attacking from multiple angles. This is like a war game, right? You see in the Second World War, the First World War, the offensive side always have a steady pace with all their fronts, right? You're gonna advance steadily with all of your people, not rushing at once like a blitzkrieg. This is exactly the same in a debate. If in a debate all your focus is on one point, then you might neglect the other points the opponents have made or the other points that your teammates have made. But by attacking from multiple angles, you can see the point in a different perspective. You can open up multiple fronts so that you can see more weaknesses in the opponent's points. So that will be the common mistakes. Now we have how to layer rebuttals. Layering rebuttals means attacking an opponent's argument from multiple perspectives to build a strong response. Instead of focusing on one rebuttal just on one point, you should present several reasons on why does the opponent's point fail. This approach not only overwhelms shadow points that the opponent made, it can also open up new weaknesses in the opponent's defense lines, and can also make sure that the others still hold even if one of your layers is weak. How to layer your rebuttals? You can take a screenshot. So first, direct refutation. Challenge the basic things that the opponent might do, right? For example, you could challenge the logic, the evidence, or an assumption behind the argument. For example, if the opponent said school uniforms are good because improve the grades, you could challenge the logic, right? You should say, no, this is wrong because the fallacy is incorrect. You can also challenge the evidence, right? For example, you could say, where is the evidence? You don't have any evidence supporting your point, and we have evidence supporting that this is not true. Or an assumption, right? We assume that something's going to be something. Second, we can reframe the argument, challenge the way the issue is viewed. For if the opponent is always one-sided and always taking the view in their own perspective, you should take the view in multiple angles. You could say, taking this point in the view of the parents, this has a disadvantage over the overall goodness of the people. Third would be providing a counterexample. Offer a real or hypothetical situation that disproves the complicates claim. You should always have a counterexample while refuting your opponent's points. You could see that the school uniforms are a safety problem, right? You could say, while yes, the school uniforms do improve the grades, but it also increases the rate of terrorism attacks on the schools. That will be a counterexample. Fourth will be attack from different perspectives. Evaluate the argument from moral, practical, legal, or systematic viewpoints. This is basically the same activity before the common mistakes. If you're always focusing on one point, then you might neglect the other weaknesses in the opponent's point. So always attack from different perspectives. Last but not least, turn the argument. Show how their argument actually supports your team or causes harm to theirs, right? This situation is usually when you've found that the opponent's arguments actually is supporting your point, but I do not recommend using this unless you have 100% full confidence in your speech.
So now we're talking about the strategic clashes in debate. So what is a clash? A clashes are high impact point of direct conflict. It's the main point of disagreement in debate. And that's why you need to choose to highlight and control them in the debate to your own favor. For example, in the uniform example, one clash might be those school uniforms improve your grades. And if you're arguing for uniforms, you need to try your best to win the main clash. So you need to respond to the main argument rather than every minor argument, because if you respond to every minor argument, you might not have enough time, enough energy to respond clearly and concisely to the main point of disagreement, which the judge and the audience are most value. And that decides the outcome of this round. So strategic clashes, they show the judge and the audience that you understand what's important, not just rebuttaling everything. You know the most important point in the debate and can win it by dominating the key battlegrounds, not just every minor battleground. That will make you seem like you don't know what's the major point, what's the main point of disagreement. So, how to win a clash? First of all, you need to listen and identify what truly matters in the debate. Like for the school uniform, you do think about what are the main clashes. School uniform, does school uniform improve grades? Does that make students happier, etc.? You need to group and collapse the argument into one major clash. There might be lots of small clashes that are very similar, and you don't have time to respond to all of them. So you should group them together and respond to them all together. You also need to frame your clash clearly. Like you need to say what is the clash, you should win it, why does it impact the debate. It's basically like a rebuttal, but it's for many arguments. It's for a clash. Focus your time and energy on what is the most important thing. Like I said before, you can't rebuttal into every minor argument. You need to focus on one or two. Finally, pre-emphasize and control. So pre-emphasize is like rebuttals. You need to control what the clash is before it even appears. You can do this by pre-rebuttaling your opponent's argument or defining the motion in your favor. So that will make you more likely to win the debate because you control what the debate is about. So many of the other team's argument might not even matter. And now we have a rebuttal checklist, and you can take a screenshot and it will help you in further debates. So first of all, do I understand the main argument? You need to firstly listen and identify the main argument that you are rebuttaling to. Am I directly addressing the key point? You need to address the key point, otherwise your rebuttals might not matter that much because it's a minor point. It doesn't matter much in the debate. Have I explained why the argument is weak or flawed without clear explanation or response to the argument? Your rebuttal does not matter to the debate because you don't even say why they're wrong. Do I have evidence or example to support my response? So that's a clear explanation. Without evidence or example or practical reasoning, your response doesn't stand because there's nothing to back it up. Just this is wrong because blah blah blah. There's nothing else. Am I keeping my rebuttals clear and concise? You need to keep your rebuttals clear and concise, like your arguments, to make it easier for the judge, the opposition, and the audience to follow. An unclear and inconcise rebuttal may confuses everyone and makes the judge lose favor of you because they don't even understand what you're trying to convey. And finally, have I shifted the debate back to what matters the most? That's winning the strategic clashes. If you haven't shifted the debate back to what matters the most, and the other team did, your many of your points and rebuttals might not matter because it's not what matters the most. You need to shift it back to your impact and state why you should win because something matters the most and your opposition does not.
So, if you have any questions, then you can ask them right now. Feel free to raise your hand or just unmute directly. So, does anyone have any questions? Well, then, if not, then we'll continue.
So what will be next? Our next lecture will be on June 15, also 10 o'clock, and it will be on delivering your speech. We will teach you how to deliver your speech in debate and discover more techniques in public speaking to make you sound more confident. Once again, stay tuned.
So our class ends here, and if you have more questions that you didn't ask in the Q&A section, you can contact us at contact@iDebateClub.org, and that's all.
Yeah, so that's basically it.